Welcome into another episode of Bully Ball on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Steph, Brandon Aiyuk went on the Pivot Podcast, still not signed, and the great Fred Warner and Patrick Willis debate. Stick around. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Steph Sanchez. This is the Bully Ball Podcast, the only podcast that is in the best shape of his life all year round. Steph, how are you today?
I'm good. I did my workouts this morning, so you might be right about that. We are in the best shape of our lives here.
I mean, when you're Nick Bosa, you're most likely in the best shape of your life, right?
Got to keep the quads right.
Bosa. But there is a video circulating of Deebo Samuel running on that ramp at like 300 miles an hour. So Deebo's certainly in the best shape of his life, wouldn't you say?
It seems like it. Yeah, he was even doing workouts at night, like pitch blackness, and yeah, I mean, all power to him. I guess we'll see what it looks like in camp.
Funny enough that he's doing it in darkness. There he is running. I would have comically fallen off of that track and just fallen straight back, but somehow Deebo Samuel is just able to look at this. I mean, he gets going and he looks like he hit, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 21 miles an hour, which is faster than my father drives. So that's crazy, right? Like he could outrun my father's
Now your dad
car.
catching strays.
Man. Oh, hey dad, I hope you're not watching, man. But yeah, you gotta drive a little bit faster, man. You gotta get a move on sometimes. You know, he's scared to honk the horn at a red light, all types of stuff. But Deebo Samuel is absolutely in the best shape of his life right now. And he said that he was doing something in dark. I'm wearing a Joker shirt, but maybe he's in his Bane era where, you merely adopted the dark and he was born in it. All right, this is off the rails. Fine. I know you're all here for this. Brandon Aiyuk went on the Pivot Podcast as promised with Ryan Clark. And these damn podcasters need to be stopped, Steph. That's just the way I'm looking at it more than anything. But I do want to play a few clips, and Rob's got them loaded up. But the one thing about this is I want everyone to remember that this was pre-recorded before the meeting with the 49ers. So there's many things that have been said that either we know now as what's going on. So it's hard to really walk away with too many takeaways, but we're definitely going to try on this one, Steph. Right before we get to this, what were your overall thoughts on the entire podcast? Because I thought it was fun. I enjoyed the Pivot Podcast a lot.
Yeah, I did like it. I think the guys asked great questions. They asked things that I think a lot of us were all kind of wondering about, like comments that were made after the Super Bowl, things of that nature, how this negotiation is going, why he's taking things to social media, like very pressing questions, but also, of course, some like somewhat more human and personal topics as well, just like also about how the Super Bowl, I guess, like impacted Brandon Aiyuk and how he was feeling and just how tough these negotiations can be. And so, yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. And I thought it was pretty funny, actually, how there almost seemed to be a bit of a panic after that came out. Like, because, people overanalyze and they look at it in the lens in which they were already looking at this entire situation. So if you're already like pessimistic about it, you're going to find one quote and be like, oh God, this means that Brandon Aiyuk wants to play with the Commanders. Jaden Daniels was there. He wants to be a Commander so bad, and all these things. And it's like, I actually felt better about it after watching. And you can kind of see that for Brandon Aiyuk, there's a bit of a, yes, wanting to voice like what's going on. And he did say like he's using all of this social media as like finding any type of leverage he can. But also like I think he pulls back a little bit. Like you see him say one thing and then he'll kind of like, but this. So like it went both ways. Like he'll say one thing that would be really good. And then, he'd kind of mention the Steelers and the Commanders, or he'd mention the Commanders first. And then he'd go like, but Brock Purdy, like he's awesome, all these things. So there was a lot of like back and forth like that, where it kind of feels like Brandon Aiyuk himself is conflicted. And I think that's a natural reaction when, you're looking at your possible future and you could see both scenarios like kind of playing out. So I thought it was a cool podcast though, overall. And, I still feel pretty positive about the entire situation.
100%. I thought one of the funniest things of this podcast as I watched the whole thing was I consider myself a student, right? And I love going back and doing history, and I have a lot of things that I remember. But it was hilarious to see Brandon Aiyuk ask Ryan Clark if he ever played in the Super Bowl, and Ryan Clark was like, "Yeah," like like he had no idea that he went there. He obviously asked Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor obviously never made it. As a Jacksonville Jaguar. Same thing with Crowder. But it was just funny for him to ask Ryan Clark that. It's like, yeah, Ryan Clark is like a forever Steeler, of course. Like they made it. He made it.
Yeah, no, that's that was
Damn.
funny. It shows the age for sure. And then like we probably won't get into it too much here, but like he also gave his top 5 like wide receivers, and then I think that shows his age a little bit as well. Nothing wrong with his top 5, it's just the order in which they are is like definitely I think shows the age.
Well, and that's the thing too is okay. Favorite, best, right? That favorite is subjective. Best feels a little bit more objective, but you can't expect someone to feel this way about a player that he didn't experience, right? Like the same thing goes for like the basketball stuff. Like the younger kid is going to say that LeBron James is the best. He wasn't alive to see Michael Jordan. The Michael Jordan fans aren't going to say that they thought Larry Bird was the best or Magic Johnson was the best because they didn't experience that. So I don't get all wrapped up in those lists when it comes to who they idolize and who they like because it has a lot to do with age, right? Like you can't expect a Yankee fan of my age to be like, yeah, Babe Ruth's the man. That was 1923. Derek Jeter's my guy. Like, I'm sorry. Derek Jeter's the best Yankee I ever saw. Like, what do you want me to do about it? I wasn't alive in 1923. Anyway, Rob, I know you've got the clips loaded. Huh? Yeah. Yeah, you watch it, but you're skating on thin ice right now, pal. All right, Rob, cut to these videos and let's get our reaction from them.
Season was over. I was trying to.
With the videos.
I was back and forth with them every day. My agent called me an hour.
Not Mario.
We were on the phone for an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, 2 hours. Hang up the phone. He calls them. He calls me back in an hour. We're trying to bang this thing out. And I wasn't worried about any other guy. I was just trying to get what I felt was appropriate for me at that time. That was the rush. That was early on in the offseason. We couldn't come to an agreement at that time. And then on top of that, other guys decided to come. Right. Or not decided to come. They got paid. Their teams rewarded them. The market changed what the market is. So we weren't able to get a deal done at that time where other guys wouldn't affect the market and I could just do what I wanted to do. But even at that time, they still didn't agree with where I was at.
Now, 49er fans, I have to give you your kudos because you have been all over this the entire time about waiting to pay people and what could possibly happen. You are 100% right. You are validated. The lackadaisical way the 49ers have kind of gone about this and going on their own time kind of blew up in their face this time. And Brandon Aiyuk is absolutely right to look at those other people that got paid, see that he has similar production, and I'm talking about Jalen Waddle, and say, oh, now I want that. It wasn't necessarily guys that he didn't think he was going to be in their pay grade. Like with Justin Jefferson, maybe that changes things from an annual average value. But he was never going to get Justin Jefferson money. He's not going to get CeeDee Lamb money. But when you look around and you see the guys that are in your tier getting paid, this absolutely blew up in your face a little bit more. And that's why we are where we are.
And quite honestly, like that could have been the case in past negotiations as well, because this has always been the timeline for the 49ers. There are always other players of that specific position group that are going to get paid in the offseason. And the 49ers seem to wait till after all of that takes place. I was joking on my show yesterday that I was like, man, Parag must be like an A+ procrastinator, man, because I think he just like he's comfortable waiting till the end. He thrives in that type of pressure and okay, let's get it done. But I think like we've kind of seen and figured like to this entire time that it does impact what the 49ers end up paying. So it's really like if they feel like waiting gives them any benefit, I'm struggling to see what that benefit is at this point, because if they're pinching their pennies and they're kind of hoping that they can save any money, like you said, it blows up in their face.
The 49ers and Parag are that kid that before they go to bed on a Tuesday, they tell their mom that their science project is due on Wednesday in the morning and they need supplies. And your mom is furious.
That's perfect.
Your
That's
mom is
perfect.
furious, right? Your mom is furious. Like, what took you so long? Why are you telling me this now? But your mom's got to get it done. And your mom's not going to let you fail. She's going to be really angry with you. She's going to be really angry with you. But they'll get it done. So, yeah, it's kind of funny how this is all kind of played out, right? Like, I think with the Nick Bosa thing, there wasn't anybody that could have changed his market in any way.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Like, that was just, he was by himself. In a wide receiver market, there's a lot of guys. And again, these guys weren't going to be free agents the next year or anything like that. Like, some of these guys were just getting their money up front. Like the Eagles went right away. The Eagles went right away to get Devonta Smith done to make him cheaper, because Devonta Smith is going to be a bargain down the line in a year or two. He's going to be a bargain, right? So you get that done right away. You give him a raise, but he becomes cheap based on the production that you expect from him. And the thing is, the 49ers don't pay you for what they think you're going to do. They pay you for what you've done. And I understand why Brandon Aiyuk is trying to get his name out there in terms of value. He's done everything that they wanted him to do. He's literally turned into the player they want him to be. And they drafted him. They developed him. He's done everything they wanted. So he feels like, why can't I, get rewarded? And I think all of that stuff goes hand in hand. So with the Bosa thing, with the Kittle thing, with the Warner thing, I don't think there was anybody that was available during those times that could have changed the market. But with wide receivers, it changes drastically and quickly, because when Jerry Jeudy gets a bunch of money from the Cleveland Browns, it's like, for what? Like, you didn't do anything. And then the guys who deserve to get paid, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, that really starts to put pressure on the 49ers because they're in his tier. And those are the people that he's been comparing himself to. And that's who I'm sure the 49ers have been comparing him to in the negotiation period.
Yeah. And I was actually surprised to, I guess, hear Brandon Aiyuk say that he would have just signed a deal. Like, it seemed like he did really want to get this done, like, quickly. And he wasn't worried about, I mean, yeah, he still wanted to get what he deserved, but at that time there was less reference, I guess, because there weren't any other deals. So it just sounded like he would have taken less than 26 million, or maybe he would have been fine with a number like 26 million, which we know now the 49ers have offered at some point. I'm thinking sometime recently, right? But Brandon Aiyuk is like, no, not anymore, because now we have all of this other all these other deals to reference. So yeah, I thought that was pretty surprising for him to admit. And I'm happy to know that he wanted to get it done quickly, because again, I think it shows the intention that, like, he does want to stay in San Francisco. At many times in this interview, I was like, yeah, like, this dude wants to be a Niner. Like, what are we even doing here?
100%. And then again, so much of this stuff, and there's so many things that are being picked apart, we know the answer to now because of the meeting, right? And
Yeah.
obviously Brandon Aiyuk mentioning Washington and Pittsburgh, that shouldn't raise any eyebrows. It's only one or two places that he could go at this point, if that was happening. But I do wonder this, the leaking of the numbers, and Brandon Aiyuk was kind of a little bit, I don't want to say standoffish. I don't want to say standoffish, but he definitely was not feeling the idea of the number being floated out there, because he thought all of that stuff should have been behind closed doors. And so much for the 49ers don't leak, right? So much for that, because I think that's completely gone right now. Tyler says, to me, Jason, it looks like laziness on the 49ers organization part, and we procrastinate until the last second. It can absolutely look like that. Shout out to you, Tyler. Thank you for the donation. Tyler, it absolutely can look like that, and I understand fans' frustration. I just think the 49ers have their way that they go about things, and the closer and closer they get to training camp, they wait to see what this team is going to look like. They think they have in their head who's going to make the 53. They have all these little things that they're going to make, and then they have this money that they intend to roll over. Like, remember when the 49ers made all this cap space and everybody says, oh, well, now they can make a move. I think they fully intend to roll this money over, and they want to get a very clear picture of that. Again, it is a little bit of procrastination, because it is going up right to the last minute with training camp before you got to put out the 53. But that's just their tried and trusted process, and they don't get away from that. And they don't let things outside change their process. What do you think, Steph?
Like, I get it, but I don't like it. because
I understand the frustration. Like it's not me.
Yeah.
It's not me saying like you have to like this.
No, I know.
This is what they do. Yeah, like I get it.
And yeah, like I understand what they do, but like it just doesn't make sense to me because I understand wanting to have a better idea of what your team is going to look like waiting after the draft. Sure. But like I feel like the draft doesn't impact that much because I mean if Brandon Aiyuk is going to sign a deal and Ricky Pearsall, who has been reported to look great, like let's just say Ricky Pearsall doesn't look great in training camp, but you get the deal done before training camp. Like, what does that change? Like, if you're still like training camp gives me all the answers. I don't think the draft really gives me any answers. I don't think OTAs really gives me any answers. It gives me half answers. It gives me like an idea, but I don't think you could base any decisions, especially ones that are tied to a lot of money like this, on just what happens before training camp. So I think that would be like the wrong move on the 49ers part to base it off of that. I understand they want more information and who knows, maybe the 49ers do like to have other deals happen before, so they do have a better idea of what the market is. I don't know, but to me, like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, again, this is more I wasn't really talking about like decisions being made around training camp in terms of, I'm talking about like the little things like of players who are going to be left off the defensive line, who they gave money to, and then that money comes free. And right, like we saw them pivot away from Nate Sudfeld very quickly, even when we were like, hey, Nate Sudfeld got signed to a backup deal, and they pivot away from that. And now all of a sudden,
so you're saying the rest of the team, with the rest of the team.
Yeah. It's not based on the fact that Ricky Pearsall is great or Jacob Cowan is great. It's more about there's going to be a defensive lineman that winds up getting let go, or there's going to be an offensive lineman that like all these other players that, Rock Ya-Sin might not make this 53. Like it's all possible. Every Thomas might be cut. All of these things, I think they have a clearer idea of what they believe going into training camp, unless something completely changes and every Thomas turns into a lockdown corner, or, whoever is the last defensive lineman really shows out. Obviously, you're taking a chance, but I think they have a good grasp on who's going to make the 53 at this point, right? Rob, do we have another clip that we want to get into? That first one was about the process before that, and I think there's a second one that you have right now, unless let me take a look. Yes. All right, go to it, Rob.
Enjoying it. I'm having fun. I felt like for the past 4 years, I kind of, took a back seat to this guy or whatever, and kind of just did what I had to do. And now I'm in a position that when I wake up in the morning, turn on the TV, they talking about me. I get on my phone, they talking about me. My mom calling me, they talking about me at work, whatever. So I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the process. I know at the end of the day, this is the time for me, this time period right now before the season starts, and to get paid and to maximize my value and continue to show who I am as a player. But right now, it's about one thing.
Now, we've talked about this as well, too. The 49ers have thrown his production right back in his face in terms of, how can we give you this amount of money when you've only had this amount of catches? And Brandon Aiyuk is like, you're the ones responsible for getting me the football. It's the guy in the hot dog suit, Tim Anderson, right? We're all trying to find the guy who did this. It's literally you, right? Like, so for me, voices a frustration of, I'm really good. And I get that Christian McCaffrey's here. I get that George Kittle is here. I get Deebo Samuel's here. But I need more. And I deserve more. And I think that's what that's about. And I don't disagree with him. I just don't know how you go about getting him more without changing offensive philosophies. I just think, again, the 49ers should just go up a little bit more in passing attempts. Yeah, exactly. This is someone slammed a hot dog car in here. And he's like, yeah, come on. We're not mad. Just admit it. And it's him. It's literally him, right? Like the 49ers are that. So again, when it comes to this, if the 49ers increase their passing attempts just a little, I'm not asking them to become a 65-35 passing team. Not asking that. And I think Brandon Aiyuk feels the same way. Yeah. The 49ers have one of the most efficient offenses, and they scored the most points. How can you argue with the way that they're going about it? But a few more targets his way would have put him in a position where they couldn't argue with him asking for that amount of money.
Right. And he knows that. He knows what he could do. Like, that was one of the other questions he got asked, right? Like, do you ever think about what you could do if you were top 10 in targets in the league, right? And he said he thinks about that all the time. And so, again, it goes back to the fact that right now he's seeing like both possibilities in front of him. And yeah, of course, he's thinking about what he could do with more targets, especially when that's getting used against him. Right. And his production used against him. And like I keep saying, like he can use that and turn it back to the 49ers, not just saying you guys control like, me getting more targets, but just also saying, hey, look at what I did with that amount of targets, with those amount of catches, like compared to everyone else in the league. Like I think he has a strong case there as well. So yeah, he said he knows what he could do. He has more to give. I think if the 49ers are gonna pay him any amount, like they should explore, okay, what can you do? Like you're not just gonna pay someone and not target him, right? So and I've said it before, like I think knowing that it's going to be either BA or Deebo, right? Like one of those guys the 49ers are going to be moving on with beyond 2025. And so let's just say it's Brandon Aiyuk. Well, if Deebo's not in the picture anymore, I would imagine Brandon Aiyuk, just by virtue of that, is going to get more targets, right? Like, so it could benefit him, I think, to be patient. I know he said it, like I've waited on this. I've been in the shadows, kind of like that's not the exact word he used, but all these guys that are in the offense and have kind of gotten attention and have gotten their deals. Like now it's his turn, and yeah, he's liking the fact that he's getting all this attention and all that. And I don't think it's like a matter of ego or that he doesn't care about the rest of the team. But I think he knows he has this opportunity in front of him. It's his turn now. It's his turn to get paid to be selfish. Like, and I hate that it's seen as being selfish, but like he has to look out for himself, and he should be looking for the most he can get out of the 49ers, out of any team in the NFL, honestly. So yeah, I mean, I support him in that, and hopefully the 49ers at some point do as well.
Players get every single dollar because when this league don't love you, they don't give you a severance package. They will cut you and send you away. This game does not love you back. Always pro player on here. And Invader 49ers says they passed more in the playoffs. They were losing every game in the playoffs, essentially, except the Super Bowl. So that's what happens when you're behind. All right. Pivoting to that, Mike Garafolo went on the Insiders on NFL Network, and he gave a little quick update. Essentially the same thing that we've heard. There's no traction on a deal right now, but there is no change towards a trade. There's no chance. There's no move to a trade proposal. So nothing, right? I mean, it's literally repeating almost the same things over and over. Yeah, they're having good talks, but they're not a trade. There's no trade. There's whatever. Steph, anything about what Mike Garafolo said?
I guess, like, I don't know. Like, I guess I find it interesting that at this point, like, Brandon Aiyuk hasn't asked for a trade because, like, at this point, like, we've seen this kind of unfold very similarly to the Deebo Samuel negotiation offseason. And Deebo Samuel did, like, request a trade. I think Brandon Aiyuk knows, and maybe, like, it seems like he almost accepts his fate that he knows he doesn't have, like, the leverage to, even if he did ask for a trade, obviously the 49ers don't have to honor it. They have the 5th-year option on Brandon Aiyuk, and even after that, they have the franchise tag option for Brandon Aiyuk. So there were a couple of times where in the interview, and then even hearing this, like, I just feel like Brandon Aiyuk is kind of accepting his fate that it's a very real possibility he's playing on the 5th-year option in 2024.
100%. And we're seeing it play out with T. Higgins, although T. Higgins has signed his franchise tag, but he's ultimately resigned to the idea that this is it. He's going to be traded next season, and it's done. It's something that, again, is a piece of leverage the 49ers have had with Brandon Aiyuk that they haven't had with Deebo Samuel. So that's always been there as well. Okay, to the biggest story in 49ers land, not Brandon Aiyuk on the Pivot Podcast, not Brandon Aiyuk and his trade request and his negotiation. The Shannon stash. We have to talk about it. The Shannon stash was debuted at Christian McCaffrey's wedding. Kyle Shanahan looks just like a James Bond villain. Is this the key to finally getting over the hump? Is this saying, I've seen what Andy Reid has been able to do with a mustache. This is the last thing that I need to do. Steph, react to the Reno 911 stash of Kyle Shanahan.
Reno 911. I love that we're calling it the Shannon stash. I mean, it's funny how everything having to do with Shanahan, you can just start with his name, like the Shannon hat. Now we got the Shannon stash. They got both similar auras, by the way. So I hope this is something that goes into the season. I hope he doesn't. He's gonna get some flack for it from the players, I think. But hey, hold on to it. Don't shave it. I also love the slick back hair look. Like this is working for Kyle. This is my coach, man. Like, look at the sunglasses. Like, this is incredible drip. Look at the bow tie, the suit. Everything's working out here. So yeah, I feel like this might just be where all the secrets are held in the mustache.
He looks like the Corleone Consigliere. Like he's gonna make you an offer that you can't refuse. And Rob says that it's a little too Jeff Fisher for his take. Rob also had a take that says no stash looks good. And I want to push back on that a little bit, Rob, because how dare you not like Tom Selleck's stash? I think that is an excellent stash, man. I don't know. Like it depends on the person. Not everyone can get away with it. There's no way I could grow a mustache like that. No way. No shot.
Have you tried? Have you ever tried?
No, I haven't tried. I'm not trying to try out to be a deputy. Like, no, I haven't tried. Like, but it's certain people can pull off the stash. Certain people can't. And it's about your aura. And it's about how you present it. That's it. So,
I just got to say, like, it was working, though. Like, so you're right. Like, not everyone could pull it off. And so I don't know if it was the combination of the slick back hair, the sunglasses, the suit, and all that. I want to see what it looks like, when he's in his regular attire, sidelines. Do you think it would still have the same type of aura?
I don't know. You know what? I just hope he keeps it, regardless.
I do,
right?
Too.
49er fans want the getting over the hump thing, right? Like they want to figure out what's the last piece. And what if it's not football strategy, it's not clock management, it's not understanding overtime rules, it's the mustache. It's the mustache. It might be. At this point, we are grasping at anything that we can point to that will say the 49ers are going to get it done, right? Christian McCaffrey becomes the Madden cover. Oh, a curse to knock off a curse. Cool. We're yelling about getting rid of mantras. We're looking for anything. It might just be the mustache. It might just be the stash.
I hope so. Everyone's talking about what Shanahan looks like with this mustache. I'm just hoping he looks like the kind of guy that could win a Super Bowl. And that's all I need.
Yeah, 100%. But the Ned Flanders look might be the move. They might be the move. Like, it just might be that.
Not Flanders,
all right.
Dude.
Let's see, we can have fun on this shows too. I mean, we're getting closer to football. Like tonight, Hard Knocks starts the offseason portion with the Giants. So like we're starting to get there. We're getting closer. Right? Like we're almost there. Training camp, the 23rd is when the veterans actually make it. So we're getting there. 21 more days. But our old buddies at PFF, they never miss a chance to ruffle any feathers with any sort of their rankings, right? And they came out with their linebacker rankings. And the San Francisco 49ers are not first on this list, Steph. And in our group chat, when I put it in there, you said, can't stand those guys, man. And I know you meant that. Like that came from the soul. But the New York Jets are ranked higher. But I do believe that there is a good reason for why the 49ers are not ranked number one going into this season. And it's because Dre Greenlaw's hurt. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. When you put that context into it, yeah, that of course that does make sense. Not everyone, when they do like rankings, factors injuries in, but in this case, they did. They made that clear. It does make sense to me.
Yeah, and CJ Mosley's a really good linebacker. Good God, the Jets have a really good defense. In fact, PFF ranked them with the number one secondary, with the 49ers at number two, and I think anybody who would have thought that the 49ers would have the second best secondary ranked by anybody would have been elated with that. And I think,
okay, that one's good.
See, that's fine. I don't care. If they were 5th, I would feel that. But they're 2nd also in secondary. But the Jets have a really good secondary and they have good linebackers. But the article does point out that if Dre Greenlaw was healthy, fully ready to go, they would have the case for number 1. And I think everyone would literally just agree with that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's fine. See, PFF can't be that bad.
It's just like, it's good when it fits my narrative, Jay.
Fits my narrative is the only way. Like, any argument should only fit what I want to present. It shouldn't go against that.
Only.
And once it does, I just completely dismiss it. You have to find
sucks.
things to fit your narrative. So again, PFF, when you put out a grade that I don't agree with, it doesn't fit my narrative. But when you say something that fits my narrative and you grade a player that I really like really highly, wow, PFF really knocked that one out the park. You see that? Like, it's just, it's all about confirming your priors and your bias. And I hope that the sarcasm is coming through the speaker, like if you're listening audio as well too. But hey, it could be missed. Now,
it's sarcasm, but it is somewhat true. Like,
it's 100% true. It's literally how people live their lives.
I'm like when they don't rank stuff the way I would, I'm like, they're just going off of their stupid grades, man.
Grades, man. Why did your voice?
They're subjective.
Why is the grumpy voice inherently sounding like our old tape watching buddy? Like, it's just crazy. Now it's just like whenever we get grumpy, we're just like, who cares, man? Jeez, man. Love you if you're watching, buddy. I don't want to say his name because it's like Candyman. He'll just show up and he'll just start telling us that we don't know.
He'll be in the comments. Like,
he'll be in the comments like,
here's
shut up,
Bernie.
man. All right. Speaking of linebackers, Steph, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really good one. So I sent out a tweet messing around before I headed to the beach on Saturday. And it's one of those, Dad, how good were this player? How good? And I put, Dad, how good was Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman? And man, it's a banger. Like, it's a banger. NFL players, former NFL players were just like, can you believe, dog? Like, it over 700,000 impressions, if I'm not mistaken. And, of course, it sparks a debate because the 49ers, we have been blessed to watch Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, now Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, even in the middle for a little while, Chris Borland. 49ers know how to get their linebackers for whatever reason with different regimes. But, Steph, the debate about Patrick Willis and Fred Warner, I want you to start because I've got inflammatory remarks and thoughts about this.
Wow. Okay. I'm curious what you think. You want me to give like my who do I think is?
Yeah, sure. Just
okay.
Kick it off, and I think we'll get there. We'll get there.
I mean, for me personally, like I do still feel like Patrick Willis is the best linebacker the 49ers have ever had, and you can make an argument he's one of the best in the game that has ever played. So I think Fred Warner is not there yet. I think when people bring up this discussion, it comes from a place of somewhat like recency bias, and I think we forget how good Patrick Willis was. He was so incredibly dominant. I mean, you're seeing this clip here. I mean, dude was a freight train. Not to say that Fred Warner like hasn't had some incredible hits, some incredible tackles, but for one, I'll say this, like, context matters as it does in most arguments and discussions. The context here is that they played in two completely different eras of football. And they were asked to do two completely different things for their respective defenses, right? So I think Fred Warner playing in today's, NFL and having been a former safety, I think he has more experience doing the coverage stuff as well as, being in the box when he needs to. But I feel like Patrick Willis was like almost exclusively like in the box. And that's why when you compare their numbers, you see Patrick Willis with the number of tackles he had and, things like that. And actually why Fred Warner has the same amount as Patrick Willis had in interceptions in his entire career, like 8 interceptions. Like Fred Warner already has 8, right? So I think that speaks to that as well. So two completely like different players, both that I can appreciate what they were able to do for their defenses. Here's the kicker though. Here for me is where like you can't really argue too much against Patrick Willis being better than Fred Warner. It's the all pros.
Oh yeah.
It's the all pros. Like it's not even close. 6 all pros. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't he do that consecutively?
And in
seven,
seasons.
because yeah, he was a second team.
No. In 7 seasons, 6 all
in 7
pro
seasons.
birds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He made Pro Bowls in every single season.
Yes, because he was technically he had 7 all pros, 6 were first team, and then 1 was I think a second team. So I mean that's hard to argue with, and you gotta remember too, like Patrick Willis was playing in an era in which Ray God, why am I spacing on his name? Ray Lewis. Yeah, Ray Lewis, Urlacher, this is pretty hard to argue that Willis was just like he's in a different tier than Fred Warner. Now, I will say like Fred Warner has the potential, he has the trajectory to maybe get up to that conversation. I just don't think he's there right now.
Okay. So, Patrick Willis and Fred Warner function differently as linebackers. Function differently. 100%.
Yeah.
2 different things. Same position, different players. That's why they both have 8 interceptions in 14 less games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Patrick was around the ball. And don't get it twisted. Patrick will go out and cover. Like, it's not exclusively something. It's just Fred is a converted safety 2 linebacker. 20 and a half sacks, though. Literally around the ball the entire time. And I hate to say this because I'm glad you brought it up because this was going to be one of my points. In an era in which Ray Lewis played, we all fought and said that Patrick Willis is better than Ray Lewis. I can stand here today and say that if Fred Warner was in that era with those guys, he would be 3rd on that list. Yeah. He's behind Ray Lewis and he's behind Patrick Willis, right? No disrespect to Levante David and the guys that he's going up against now, but they ain't Ray. And Patrick Willis was in here when the 49ers defense was not good early on in his career, literally wrecking games. It is a lot of recency bias. It is what we're going to see. The argument comes down to this: peak and longevity. Cover your ears, 49ers fans, because you're not going to like this. Frank Gore has more rushing yards than a lot of running backs. Frank Gore is not better than a lot of running backs, even though he has more yards. Longevity and peak. Can you look me in the eye and tell me that Frank Gore was better than Barry Sanders, even though he has more yards than him? No. Doesn't take away from the fact that Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer. Doesn't take away from the fact that he is going to be one of the greatest that's ever played. But right now, Fred Warner is going to play 14 games this season and pass Patrick Willis. Patrick Willis only plays 7 seasons. I have a hard time with he is going to pass him in this, and this, but Luke Kuechly against Fred Warner? Ooh, wow. Let me get this point off real quick, and then we'll get back to that one. That one's really good. Yeah. But 7 years only, but his peak is 6 All-Pros, 7 Pro Bowls, right? And a guy who was an absolute machine, 20 and a half sacks, everything, tackling machine, tackled everybody. Absolute dog. And it's going to be, Warner's going to pass him this year in tackles. He'll most likely get an interception. Same thing. But Pro Football Reference has something that they call average value added. And it's their own formula in terms of how much you're adding to your team. In 112 games, the average value added by Fred Warner, 108. In 98 games, Fred Warner, 77. Now, again, that's their own formula. But this is the absolute crux of the argument. Peak against longevity. I am not going to knock Fred Warner for playing long because his game is hard to play long. That's why so many guys retire so early. But this 7-year stretch in which it's going to be the same thing, you've got Fred Warner with 9 sacks, 20 and a half. They're going to pass each other in solo tackles. That's fine. 16 forced fumbles. in the same amount of time, essentially, and then 6 All-Pros, it's hard for me to automatically just say, oh, Fred's better. Fred's going to play longer. But I don't know in this 7-year stretch that he was better than Patrick Willis, and I have a hard time with that. I would take Patrick Willis in this same 7-year stretch instead of Fred Warner. And I'm sorry, guys. This is a lot of recency bias. It is definitely prisoner of the moment stuff.
Yeah, let me ask you this. If you were to put Fred Warner in Patrick Willis's era and vice versa, you put Patrick Willis in this current era, who do you think would perform better? Because I think that would give you a bit of your answer too.
That's the era thing, right? Like, again, with basketball, like, could LeBron have survived in the 90s when you could actually, like, play defense and stuff like that? And it's the same thing, like, with Montana and Brady, right? Montana used to take a lot of hits. And, yeah, that's true. Patrick Willis' style could have been good in 1920, and now, you know, I think it absolutely, you can't say that there's any way that Patrick Willis played that game that he would not be a liability today. Too smart, too savvy, and too much of a, like, he just around the ball. Patrick Willis would be fine. He would be fine. Now,
that's what I'm saying.
Fred Warner, in the era of the big guys and where the linebackers were more thumpers, and Fred Warner can hit. Like, don't. Again, this is not a takedown of Fred Warner. I think Fred Warner struggles more in that time because you have to be as physical as that. Now, he's perfect for what goes on right now. He's perfect for
exactly.
Because he can cover, he can run with CeeDee Lamb 30 yards up the field. That's the advantage of having Fred Warner as a safety converted. But Patrick Willis could play like that in any era against anybody.
That's what I'm saying. So I think that just gives more points to the argument in favor of Patrick Willis. So yeah, it's a fun discussion, but I personally don't think it's an argument right now.
It's not. And again, if the argument's going to be based on longevity and it's going to be based on accumulated numbers, then I don't think this is much of a discussion. But us as 49er fans, we watched Patrick Willis. We watched him day in, day out. Even when the 49ers were horrible, he was the bright part. Him and Frank Gore were the bright parts of this team, and they were dominant. You know, I remember the whole thing about Pro Bowls, and he was a Pro Bowler every single year. Obviously, the Pro Bowl has lost a little bit of its luster. Like when you see like Tyler Huntley make it, it's like, okay, now the Pro Bowl kind of is losing a little bit of name recognition. But that meant something because he was the first player to ever make every single Pro Bowl to start his career. And that's, again, like you said, Brian Urlacher, all these guys, Luke Kuechly during his time, all these guys. Ray Lewis on the other side. Obviously, the All-Pro is AFC, NFC, so they weren't going to be competing. But we as 49er fans were arguing tooth and nail that Patrick Willis was better than Ray Lewis, and Ray Lewis is one of the greatest of all time. It's hard for me to have that. I think we all, let's just say this. I think we all agree Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football right now, hands down. But the competition for the number one linebacker right now is nowhere near as tough as it was back then with all of those studs as linebackers. That's not taking anything away from Fred because he still is the best. But no disrespect to Levante David and CJ Mosley and any middle linebacker that wants to try to have a claim. But they ain't Ray, they ain't Kuechly, and they ain't Urlacher. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's a fun topic though. And one that I'm sure we'll be having for many more years. I mean, until Fred retires, probably.
Now look at this. This is Luke Kuechly or Fred Warner. Can you blow this up a little bit? There you go. All right, thank you. Whew. Okay, so 20 more games, 10 more interceptions, 3.5 more sacks, 200 more tackles. He's going to pass that this year. This is close. This is absolutely close. The thing about Luke was he was maniacal with what he saw. 7 All-Pros in basically the same amount of time as well, too. He was maniacal and a defensive player of the year. He was maniacal in the way he prepared with film. Ooh, this one is really, really, really interesting. And those 18 interceptions were based on him understanding what the offense was trying to do. He was a maniacal preparer. And that's what Luke did. And obviously a phenomenal athlete. I'm not saying that he's just getting all by on his smarts, but you have to be in the right position to be able to make a play. Ooh, man, this one is a very, very interesting conversation, Steph.
Yeah, this one's definitely closer. I mean, Kuechly's even had the defensive player of the year as well, which I don't know, like is it with the way that the game has changed, like do you think that linebackers just don't get that same amount of love? Cuz like we're here talking about Warner being like the best linebacker in today's NFL, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he's never been a defensive player of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
I don't know, like are
essentially, the
there
defensive player of the year is reserved for edge rushers now.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like, do you think things have shifted where, like,
Yeah,
I think
look,
in that era, linebackers were like the nucleus, and like you can argue it still is, but you know what I mean. Like that was like the foundation
right.
of your team or your defense.
And it doesn't matter how good your linebackers are in a passing league. If your corners aren't good, you're gonna struggle. Like Fred Warner could be the best in the league, like we think he is. But if your corners are consistently getting beat, your defense isn't going to be good. Or if you have no pass rush, right? Like I think right now the shift is more this league, the defensive focus is always going to be on edge rushers. Edge rushers have such an importance in wrecking games and being guys that can like really change games based on either forced fumbles or forcing interceptions in this league that's very much passing. So have they been devalued a little? Sure. In the same way that running backs have been devalued in the modern game, right? The last 12 MVPs have been quarterbacks. But every other position that has won essentially has been running back. Lawrence Taylor won an MVP once, but have been running backs. And think about those times. Barry Sanders was a co-MVP with Brett Favre, right? Back-to-back years, Sean Alexander and LaDainian Tomlinson won, right? So the only other position that was usually winning MVP after quarterback was running back. Now, defensive player of the year is generally an edge rusher, either Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, maybe Micah Parsons one day, or maybe a shutdown corner, like someone of a Sauce Gardner, maybe something like that. But it's generally for edge rushers. And Tyler, thank you again for the donation. Jason, if Patrick Willis was on his defense now with Fred Warner, would be the best defense in football. You mean if you're talking about them playing together? If they were together, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's easy.
No disrespect, Dre Greenlaw. But if I have a chance to bring in prime Patrick Willis, absolutely. Like, it's a done deal. But again, right? What the 49ers asked of Patrick Willis back then. Obviously, the game was a little bit different, right? Like, there was a lot more emphasis on running the football. It wasn't as like spread out wide open, right? Like towards the end of Willis's career is when it started to, get in that way. He still was covering people. Like, I don't want this to like turn into something where it's just like, oh, Willis can't cover. He would be a liability. Sure, it's not what you want. It's not something that you, and I'm sure that's something that, you're going to try to avoid over and over. But let's not get it twisted like Patrick Willis couldn't cover people. And I think that's another thing that because we give Fred Warner so much credit, it shouldn't make you misremember that Patrick Willis was just as good at times when he was asked to do those things, even if he wasn't asked to do it as much as Fred Warner because Fred can do it better.
Yeah. And Willis was like an athletic freak as well. You guys got to remember that. Just like one that goes with the way they were built and just how much bigger they were back then. But he was like, I mean, what was his 40 coming out? I want to say like he had a really fast 40 time as well.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, converted safety. You would think that they a little bit faster.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about Willis.
Oh, talking about Patrick Willis. Oh, yeah. Willis was a freak. Yeah,
that's absolutely what I'm saying. Like he was an athletic freak. So, I mean, I think that's why we're saying if you plop Patrick Willis into today's NFL, he would still figure out a way to
4.51.
4.51. Okay. Yeah, he'd still find a way to be a dog and be effective. So I think he'd be able to do the same things that Fred Warner does and is asked to do.
I love this one. And this is such a great discussion. I am having a blast talking about this because again, this is just my opinion. There's no right or wrong. I understand if anybody believes that Fred Warner is going to be better than Patrick Willis. That's fine. It's an argument that I can see. If I have a hard time because we're so wrapped up in where Fred is now, and we love him so much. He's my favorite 49er. I am literally telling you this right now. My favorite 49er. I have a Willis, I have a Bowman, and I have a Fred. So 52, 53, 54 jerseys. But the recency bias makes us forget what Patrick was, how good he was. And this is the question. Leon Sandcastle, Deion Sanders' alter ego says, NaVorro Bowman or Dre Greenlaw. Now, Dre Greenlaw's only played a few years. Okay, let's just make that clear. It's very hard to right now say one or the other. Actually, it's really easy. It's NaVorro Bowman.
It's really easy. I was gonna say, like, this is less a debate than, Willis and Warner, personally.
Yeah, it's Bowman. It's NaVorro Bowman. Dre Greenlaw has time, right? But again, peak in longevity. We're going to keep talking about this. Look at this. So he's played essentially 40 more games, essentially.
Yeah.
It's hard right now to just you can't have this discussion yet with Greenlaw and Bowman. You can't. Because at least with Warner and Willis, he's going to have the same amount of seasons this season. So you'll have the extended sample size, and then from there, it'll be up to you to decide whose 7-year stretch was much more dominant. Again, I'm going to side with Patrick Willis on that one, but Fred is going to be able to pass that. Right now, this isn't close. 5 to interceptions to 3, again, converted. Safety, obviously, NaVorro Bowman has one of the greatest interceptions in 49er history. Pick at the stick. 14 sacks to 3.5. Again, asked to do 2 different things. 585 solo tackles to 292. 9 forced fumbles, 6 fumbles recovered. 3 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros. None for Dre Greenlaw. No Pro Bowls, huh? For Dre Greenlaw, right? Doesn't that one feel a little wrong?
I mean, yeah, I feel like he should at least have one under his belt at this point. But look, I'm not going to base the argument off of that. I think, again, this one's not an argument. This is barely a discussion to me. And I'll just say this, like, I think when you look at Fred and you look at Willis, I think you like what I said, that Fred, you can see that he can be on a trajectory to eventually, it might be a discussion at some point in the future by the time, like, Fred's career is over. I don't think I could say the same about Bowman and Greenlaw, personally.
And I love this comment from Corey. Bowman has seasons where he was better than Willis. Greenlaw has never been better than Willis, 100%.
I think, too, like, that did have to do with, like, Bowman kind of being... He was kind of like the hybrid and the perfect, like, middle, like, linebacker to what the 2 eras that we're talking about. Like, Bowman was a hybrid of both types of linebackers that we have in from that past era.
I love Patrick Willis and NaVorro Bowman, just like all you guys do.
They were different.
Again, yeah, it's just, and even when I was going through the tweet, Eagles fans and Seahawks fans, like, sure, there were a few of those jokes like, well, not good enough to win a Super Bowl. Yeah, good thing they played quarterback as well too, right? Like, that never made any sense to me, that discussion. But Eagles fans and Giants fans, they're all chiming in on this tweet like, this was the best duo I ever saw, ever. And I think, objectively, we all have our biases with our teams. But 49er fans, we can recognize the Legion of Boom as an amazing defense, right? Bobby Wagner was amazing, right? Like, those, Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas, that's incredible, right? But when you start to see that pouring out of love from other fan bases and almost saying, without a doubt, that this is the best duo, we were so blessed, man. We were so blessed and lucky. And I think, again, we can say objectively right now, even though it's kind of subjective, objectively right now that Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football. But the part that shouldn't blind you about Patrick Willis is that I think Patrick Willis would have done this in any era. Soft helmets, now, you couldn't hit, you could hit. It didn't matter. You know how you judge a player, and I love to say it this way, bottom of the pile guy. Like, when the pile gets up, who's at the bottom of the pile? Who's the one that's always getting up last? And it was always either Patrick or NaVorro. Always. No matter who had the ball, it seemed like. And this has got me all nostalgic. I'll probably go to sleep in my my Willis jersey tonight and maybe watch some highlights, cry some thug tears. But I love Fred Warner. I just don't think that we can say that he's better than Patrick Willis. And you know what? If I have to catch a bunch of strays and die on this hill alone, fine. But again, I just don't want you to lose sight of what Patrick Willis was because of what we're watching with Fred now, which is just as good.
And you know what? I don't feel like these arguments should get like ugly
Testy.
and like there. Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
you don't?
Like there's no loser here. Like we're all 49er fans. Like they all played for the Niners. We are winning in that regard. So but again, like, so that's why to me it's just fun. It's just fun to talk about it. But it's like, man, like when you think about Willis and Bowman and how they transcended, like what you're saying, rivalries. They transcended like to other teams and other fan bases saying like, yeah, man, like that's the best duo we've seen. That's incredible. Like that's real. Like that and that's hard to do. Like that's not something that's common. So I mean, man, I'm lucky that like we're all lucky that we've been able to see both of those tandems, but especially like Willis and Bowman.
Over under on Jason is an idiot responses after this inevitably gets clipped and Rob throws it out. Over under we'll set it at 5.
I hope not. That was again like that's so.
Look,
it doesn't have to make sense, but people, yeah.
Twitter is the greatest place for people to push back on things that are objectively true. Meaning, I could put out a tweet that says 2 + 2 is 4, and 49ers fan 92748 will be like, "What an idiot! What do you mean 2 + 2 is 4?" Like, what, Steph? Did you forget the hellscape that can be 49ers Twitter at times?
Yeah, and it's true. That reminds me of the Keanu Reeves quote from recently. He's just in a different part of his life now, where it's just like if someone says 4 + 4 = 5, he's like, "Sure, man,
have fun."
All right, man.
I'm trying to be as zen as Keanu Reeves as well too, but we all know I get pulled out of character here and there. But this was an amazing show. I had a blast with this last segment, guys. Make sure you guys in the comments let us know what you think about Willis against Warner. Contextualize your thoughts. I think this is a discussion that's going to rage on probably until Fred Warner stops playing football eventually in terms of peak against longevity. But that'll do it for us, guys. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the Gold Standard Podcast Network wherever you get your audio podcasts. Make sure you follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Follow me on Twitter, Jason Aponte2103, and yell at me about my thoughts on Patrick Willis and Fred Warner, please. And make sure you check out both of our YouTubes as well, too. There's some good content on there as well, too. But for Steph, for Jay, we're out here.
Peace.